Many of you have traveled a great deal, and some of you, no doubt, have seen Coventry Cathedral in England, both the old and the new. And some of you might know a lot about its incredible story. During World War II, Coventry was an industrial hub and included munitions factories and also an aircraft engine building plant. There were many attacks on the city, and the worst blitz was on November 14th, 1940, when over 500 planes from the German Luftwaffe bombed and dropped both explosive and incendiary bombs on the city. Most of the city was leveled, and among the buildings which were destroyed was the Gothic Coventry Cathedral, dating from the 14th century. Only the shell of the West Tower and the West Tower remained standing, and almost immediately the leaders of the church decided they were going to rebuild. The remains of the old are still there, still standing, and beside it is a new one dedicated in 1962. They decided to dedicate it to reconciliation with a vision to build a kinder and more Christ child like world. To some degree, it sounds like our mission and vision statement, making God's kind of world real. At the centerpiece of the new cathedral is the inspiring tapestry, 42 feet wide, 70 feet high. It depicts the ascended Christ, Christ in glory. Jesus had blessed his disciples and departed from them to go back to the Father and to his rightful place of glory. It is part of the New Testament witness, but we have always been troubled by the mechanics of it. Philip Yancey, whose books we have sometimes read in our small groups, said ascension was his greatest struggle. Was Jesus lifted up Mary Poppins style as the disciples gaped and craned their necks until he disappeared into the clouds? Did he zoom up like Rocket Man? Did he go gently up like a dove? How fast was he traveling? How was he able to breathe? We don't have answers, and the biblical writers have no interest in answering them. Their intent was to convey to us their profound faith in their experience of Jesus. It is told within the framework of their understanding of the universe, heaven above and hell below, and earth sandwiched in between. The Norse, and of course Tolkien, call it Middle Earth, the space inhabited by humans. We long ago gave up the idea of a three-story universe, but if we are stuck there in our debates about the understanding of the disciples, we completely miss the point of the story. The story is not about cosmology and the construction of the universe. It is all about Christology. Who is Jesus? What is he all about? Where is he now? He came from glory, took on the form of a servant. He died on a cross, was raised from the dead, and is now with God in glory. And he is with us now in his spirit. And wherever that world might be, it really is not that far away. It does not submit to GPS coordinates or dimensions as with a city wall. But God is near. People still sense his presence in amazing and miraculous ways. Here was Stephen, who's been condemned to death by the Sanhedrin, and they drag him out to stone him to death. And there, as he is submitting to those who would attack him, the veil between heaven and earth is parted. And he says he was filled with the Holy Spirit, and he gazed into heaven, and he said, I see the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And that enraged the crowds even more, and they stopped their ears and ground their teeth, and the stones started flying. Or here is Peter on the rooftop of Joppa with swaying palm trees on either side and gentle ocean breezes from the Mediterranean. And there he sees heaven opened and this curtain, this sheet coming down. And here was a message: foreigners, strangers, and Gentiles too have a valued place in God's kind of world. Or here is Paul galloping at full tilt towards Damascus, breathing fire, intent on killing as many Christians as he could. And Christ appears to him and stops him. And he falls off the horse, blinded by the light of Christ's presence. Perhaps the separation between earth and heaven is not as dense, as impassable as we might imagine. Some people speak of thin spaces where somehow they're more sensitive to another world. Some call it the fourth dimension. But perhaps there have been times when you have sensed that the other world is very close at hand, and you experience God's presence, and you know that you are not alone. I have. Hold on to those moments when life is dry and you feel lost, and the sky turns dark and the storm clouds gather, or the earth shifts beneath your feet and you have that feeling of sinking into chaos, and you can do nothing about it. But in those moments, remember that Jesus is close at hand. In Luke, we have a departure story, a farewell. Usually there are tears and grief, but not here. We're told that the disciples returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple blessing God. What is all that about? Why rejoice? What was their conviction that caused them such great joy? Life had not changed dramatically. They were still under Roman rule, and the temple politics brought no comfort. What was there to celebrate? We might ask ourselves, what is there to celebrate in our day? We're in the midst of a pandemic, and beyond even the pandemic, perhaps you have other worries. We wonder what is happening in the most powerful, most prosperous nation in the world, since our future as Canadians is so closely tied to theirs. We worry about the rhetoric between world leaders, or about those wild conspiracy theories. With all this angry talk, will there be war with China? Where will all this animosity end? What is the truth about a vaccine? Should we buy into the notion that what matters most for humankind or country is financial prosperity, everything else be damned? Not much had changed for the disciples, but they rejoiced because they knew how the story ends. The author of Ephesians writes that God raised Jesus from the dead and made him sit at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, not only in this age, but also in that which is to come. What he was saying to us is that Jesus has the last word, and it is his standard, his way of living, his ethic that counts and matters in the end. The ascension means that any love and tenderness, and compassion and concern that you have seen in Jesus as he walked this earth is the truth about God and also how we should live. In Coventry Cathedral, there is a sobering and haunting sculpture. It is a brass plumb line hanging over the skyline of the city of Coventry. It's a reminder of the grim vision of Amos in the Old Testament. There was the Lord standing beside a wall, holding in his hand a plumb line. And God asks Amos, Amos, what do you see? And Amos says, a plumb line. And God says to him, see, I'm setting a plumb line here in the midst of my people Israel. I will see how they measure up to my standards. There are times when culture does not teach us or help us in doing what is right, in observing and following what is best. North American culture teaches us to pamper ourselves, to indulge ourselves. That is what matters. That is what counts. And our culture is wrong. The glorified Son, Jesus Christ, has given us the standard, the plumb line, by which we are to live and by which we will be measured. And the measure is not wealth or power or pleasure, but our compassion. Don't grow weary in well-doing, dear friends. Your love is what matters. The morning after Coventry Cathedral was bombed, they found in the charred remains the great big supporting beams that had fallen but had not been fully consumed. And from the beams they fashioned a cross. And behind the cross are the words, Father, forgive. And they wrote a litany which is beautiful and very moving, and which perhaps in your time you could go to the website and look up. It is prayed every day at noon. And let me just read the first line. Forgive us for the hatred which divides nation from nation, race from race, class from class. Father, forgive. It ends, be kind to one another, tender-hearted in every way. Amid tragedy and horror, they were emphasizing God's plumb line. There are so many stories of love and sacrifice, and in these pandemic days, you can go to the New York Times and there are some wonderful short stories of love and self-sacrifice. But I'd like to share with you a beautiful story of love when, as now, options were limited in how one could express love and caring. It is told by Gerda Weizmann Klein, who was in a Polish concentration camp during the days of the Holocaust. Most people, she said, think of camps as snake pits, places of hardship where people stepped on each other to survive. But it wasn't like that at all. There was much kindness and understanding among the prisoners. Gerda had a young friend named Ilse, and one day Ilse found a raspberry in the camp, and she carried it all day in her pocket to present it to Gerda that evening on a leaf. Imagine, she said, a world where your entire possession is one raspberry, and you present it to your friend, delicately presented on a leaf. It is God's world, where Christ reigns, And Christ has shown us how to live. That is what matters in the end.